How long did you think you could hide it? The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Margaret Hampton's perfectly manicured finger pointed across the mahogany dining table, straight at my husband Marcus. Her voice was calm, controlled, deadly. Dylan, my 9-year-old son, sat frozen with his fork halfway to his mouth, green eyes wide with confusion. His Superman t-shirt, the one I'd carefully ironed that morning, suddenly felt too childish for this adult war zone. Marcus's face went white. The wine glass in his hand trembled, sending ripples across the surface of the expensive Cabernet. "Mom, what are you?" "Don't." Margaret's voice cut through his protest like a scalpel. "Don't you dare pretend anymore." I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Around the table, Jessica, Marcus's sister, leaned forward with the hungry look of someone about to witness a car crash. Her husband, Brad, stared down at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Richard, Marcus's father, cleared his throat but said nothing. "Sarah deserves to know the truth," Margaret continued, her silver eyes now fixed on me. "About you. About Dylan. About all of it. 3 hours earlier." "You sure you're okay?" I'd asked Marcus as we pulled into his parents' circular driveway. The Hampton house loomed before us, all Georgian columns and perfectly manicured hedges, looking like it belonged in a magazine about old money. Marcus had gotten a phone call during the drive, and I'd watched his jaw tighten as he listened to whoever was on the other end. When he hung up, his knuckles were white where he gripped the steering wheel. "Just family stuff," he'd said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Dylan had bounced out of the car, clutching the handmade turkey crafts we'd spent the morning creating. "Dad's secrets are probably just about Grandma's cooking," he'd said with that innocent wisdom kids sometimes have. Marcus had gone very still. Now, sitting at this formal dining table with its crystal glasses and ancestral portraits, I understood that whatever secret my husband had been carrying, it was about to detonate our carefully constructed life. "Marcus." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "What is she talking about?" He looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, guilt, and underneath it all, a love so desperate it made my chest ache. "I can explain." "Can you?" Margaret's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Because I think it's time everyone knew exactly who Dylan really is. And who you've been pretending to be." The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away seconds that felt like hours. Dylan set down his fork with a small clink that echoed like thunder. And I realized that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The Hampton house had always felt like a museum to me, beautiful, expensive, and decidedly untouchable. Walking through its marble foyer 3 hours earlier, I'd noticed Dylan shrinking beside me, his usual chatter replaced by careful whispers. "Welcome," Margaret had said, her embrace as cold as her voice. She'd looked down at Dylan, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Recognition? Regret? Then her social mask slipped back into place. "Hello, Dylan." Not sweetheart. Not honey like other grandmothers. Just his name, spoken like she was reading it off a form. "That boy has grown," Richard had murmured to Marcus, his eyes lingering on Dylan in a way that made my skin crawl. Jessica swept in wearing designer everything, her twin boys trailing behind her like expensive accessories. "Marcus." "Sarah." Air kisses all around. When she got to Dylan, she paused. "My goodness. He's gotten so, you know." "What?" I'd asked. "Just older." But her eyes said something else entirely. As we'd made our way to the parlor, I caught fragments of hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached. Richard showing Marcus something on his phone, their heads bent together seriously. Jessica whispering urgently to her mother before quickly stepping away when she saw me watching. The house felt different today. Usually, the Hampton family tolerated us with practiced politeness. Today, There was an electric current running underneath everything, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. Mom, Dylan had tugged on my sleeve. Why does everyone keep staring? I'd looked around and realized he was right. Every adult in the room had been sneaking glances at my son when they thought no one was looking. Not the casual observation of relatives, but something more intense. More knowing. Where are the family photos? Dylan asked innocently, pointing to the empty spaces on the walls where picture frames usually sat. Margaret appeared at his shoulder so quickly it made me jump. Oh, those old things. They're being cleaned. She'd guided him away from the wall with a firm hand. Cleaned? The Hampton family pictures had been in the same spots for the 5 years I'd known them. Why were they gone today? I'd tried to catch Marcus's eye, but he was deep in conversation with his father by the fireplace. His shoulders were rigid, his jaw set in that way that meant he was holding back something explosive. Jessica sidled up to me with her practiced smile. You know, Sarah, it's funny how time changes everything, isn't it? What do you mean? Oh, just how we think we know people. How we think we know their stories. She sipped her wine, watching me over the rim. Sometimes the truth has been there all along, and we just miss it. Before I could ask what she meant, Margaret called us to dinner. Sarah, dear, would you mind helping me in the kitchen? Margaret's request wasn't really a request. I followed her through the swinging doors into the gleaming kitchen, where Jessica was already arranging asparagus on a serving platter. Never thought we'd see him again, Jessica was saying as we entered. Shh, Margaret hissed, shooting her daughter a warning look. Too late. I'd heard enough to feel my stomach drop. See who again? Oh, nothing important, Margaret said quickly, busying herself with the gravy boat. Just family gossip. But Jessica was apparently done with subtlety. Mom, she's going to find out anyway. Might as well. Jessica. The warning in Margaret's voice could have frozen water. I stood there, feeling like I was watching a tennis match where I didn't know the rules. Find out what? The two women exchanged a look heavy with meaning. Finally, Margaret sighed. All these years, and you never suspected anything? Suspected what? My heart was starting to race. The way Dylan looks. His mannerisms. Surely you've noticed. That he looks like himself? I snapped, my maternal instincts flaring. He's 9 years old. What exactly am I supposed to have noticed? Margaret set down the gravy boat with deliberate care. Have you ever wondered about the timing, Sarah? The timing of what? Of when you met Marcus. Of when Dylan was born. Of that lovely story Marcus tells about your first date. My mouth went dry. What are you talking about? Jessica leaned against the counter, clearly enjoying this. Marcus disappeared for almost a year, you know. Right before he randomly met you at that coffee shop. He was deployed, I said automatically. He told me about that. Did he? Margaret's smile was razor sharp. Did he tell you where? Did he mention what he was doing during those months? The kitchen felt like it was spinning. He was in the military. He had to go wherever they sent him. Of course. Margaret's voice dripped with false sympathy. That's what he told you. There was something else in her tone, a satisfaction that made my skin crawl. Like she knew something delicious and terrible, and she was savoring every moment before the reveal. We should get back, I said quickly, reaching for the door. Sarah. Margaret's voice stopped me. Are you happy? Really happy? With this life Marcus has built for you? The question hung between us like a blade. Behind Margaret's perfectly composed expression, I caught something that looked almost like pity, because sometimes, she continued softly, the things we think are gifts are really just opportunities. I walked back to that dining room on unsteady legs, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to ask. As I took my seat, I noticed Dylan watching the adults with those two wise eyes of his, like he could sense the undercurrents too. Marcus reached for my hand under the table. His palm was cold and damp. Whatever was coming, he knew it was coming too. Margaret Hampton orchestrated dinner like a conductor leading an orchestra toward a crescendo. Everything was precisely arranged, the gleaming china positioned just so, the candles casting dramatic shadows across faces, the seating chart that seemed innocent until you realized Dylan had been placed as far from the family photos as possible. Well, the photos that weren't currently being cleaned. "Dylan, you're down there. Sweetheart," Margaret directed with her steel-wrapped in silk voice, pointing to the far end of the table. I started to object. He was 9. He should sit with the family, but Marcus's hand on my arm stopped me. He was looking pale, almost green. "It's fine, Mom," Dylan said quietly, settling into his chair like he'd accepted his exile. As the first course was served, conversation flowed around topics that felt carefully chosen. Richard's golf game, Jessica's charity work, Marcus's promotion. Safe subjects that skirted around the obvious tension in the room. But I noticed how Margaret kept glancing at Dylan. Not grandmother looks more like someone studying a puzzle they were finally ready to solve. "You know," Richard said, cutting into his prime rib, "Dylan's gotten quite tall." "What is he now, about 4'9"? 4'8", I answered automatically. Richard chewed thoughtfully. Marcus was almost 5 feet when he was 9. Tall for his age. An odd silence fell. Jessica cleared her throat. "Family resemblance is such a funny thing, isn't it?" she said, her voice bright with false cheer. "Sometimes kids look nothing like their parents. Sometimes they look exactly like someone you'd never expect." Marcus's knife clattered against his plate. "Sorry," he muttered, but I could see his hands shaking. Dylan, bless him, tried to contribute to the conversation. "My teacher says I'm good at math, just like Dad." "Just like Dad," Margaret repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "How interesting." "Mom," Marcus's voice was strained. "Let's not." "Not what?" Margaret's eyes were bright with what looked like anticipation. "Not talk about family? Not mention how remarkable it is that Dylan has your gift for mathematics? Your exact eye color? Your mother's chin." "Whose chin?" I asked, confused. "Marcus's mother." "My mother." Margaret's smile could have cut glass. She had the most distinctive chin. A little pointed, right here. She touched her own face. Just like Dylan's. The room went very quiet. Even the candle flames seemed to still. Dylan touched his chin self-consciously. "I do." "Oh yes, sweetheart. You absolutely do." Marcus stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "I need some air." But Margaret's voice stopped him cold. "Sit down, Marcus. We're just getting to the interesting part." The grandfather clock chimed 8 times, marking each second like a countdown. To what? I was about to find out. Marcus remained standing, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of his chair. The formal dining room, with its oil paintings of long-dead Hamptons and crystal chandelier, felt like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. "Sit down," Margaret repeated, her voice carrying all the authority of someone who'd ruled this house for 40 years. "No." The word escaped Marcus like a confession. "Not if you're going to." "What?" "Tell the truth." Margaret's laugh was crystalline and cruel. "How novel." Jessica leaned forward, her eyes bright with the anticipation of spectacle. Brad kept studying his plate like it might sprout answers. Richard reached for his wine glass with the careful precision of someone who'd weathered family storms before. Dylan looked between the adults, his young face creased with worry. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart," I said automatically, but my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Is it?" Margaret's gaze swept across the table like a spotlight. "Sarah, dear, do you remember the story Marcus told you about how you met?" My throat felt dry. "Of course. The coffee shop on 5th Street. We bumped into each other, and he spilled his latte all over my book." "How romantic," Jessica murmured. "What was the book?" Margaret asked innocently. The question caught me off guard. It was about child development. I was taking classes at the community college. Ah, yes, because you were a single mother. With a toddler. Margaret set down her fork with deliberate precision. Dylan would have been, what? 2? 3 years old. 2.5, I said automatically. 2.5. Margaret savored the words. And Marcus, fresh out of his mysterious deployment, just happened to bump into you. Just happened to fall in love with both you and your adorable little boy. How wonderfully convenient. What are you implying? But even as I asked, something cold was spreading through my chest. Margaret turned to her son. Marcus, would you like to tell Sarah about your deployment? About where you were stationed? About what you were doing during those 9 months you were gone? Marcus's face had gone from pale to gray. Mom, please. Or should I tell her about the letters? What letters? I whispered. The ones he sent. The ones he never mailed. The ones we found in his room after he left. Margaret's eyes glittered with something that might have been triumph or cruelty or both. Letters to a girl named Sarah. Letters about how he was sorry he had to leave. How he'd never forget her. How he'd never forget their son. The world tilted. The elegant dining room seemed to spin around me like I was trapped in a snow globe someone had shaken too hard. Marcus. My voice barely qualified as a whisper. He finally looked at me, and I saw my answer in his eyes before he spoke. I can explain. I can explain. The words hung between us like a bridge made of glass, beautiful, transparent, and ready to shatter at the slightest pressure. Dylan's fork clattered to his plate. The sound echoed through the silence like a gunshot. Marcus, I said carefully, like I was talking to a wild animal. What is she talking about? He closed his eyes, took a deep breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his soul. When he opened them again, he looked like a man stepping off a cliff. 10 years ago, I was stationed at Fort Campbell. I was 28, young, stupid. His voice was steady, but I could see the muscle in his jaw jumping. I met this girl at a bar near the base. She was beautiful and smart, and she had this laugh that could light up a room. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the table, trying to anchor myself to something solid. We had 6 months together before my unit shipped out. I was crazy about her. About you. His eyes found mine across the table. Her name was Sarah. No. The word escaped me like a breath. I wanted to marry her before I left, but she said she wanted to wait. See if what we had was real or just military romance. Marcus's voice cracked. While I was deployed, she wrote to tell me she was pregnant. Dylan had gone very still beside me. His green eyes, Marcus's green eyes, were wide with an understanding that no 9-year-old should have to carry. I tried to get leave to come back. Pulled every string I had. But by the time I made it home, Marcus turned to me, his face etched with pain. You didn't remember me. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. The doctors said it was the trauma from the car accident. It happened when you were 8 months pregnant. The brain injury, the emergency C-section. He swallowed hard. You lost 6 months of memory, including me. That's not possible. But even as I said it, I could feel something stirring in the back of my mind. Fragments. Faces. A feeling of missing something I couldn't name. I tried to help you remember. Showed you photos, told you stories. But the doctors said pushing could make things worse. So He looked down at his hands. I left. Margaret leaned back in her chair like she was watching her favorite movie. Oh, this is the best part. I changed my name slightly, grew out my hair, started going by my middle name instead of my first. And 3 years later, I accidentally bumped into you in that coffee shop. The coffee, the book, the way he'd seemed so natural with Dylan from the beginning. You've been lying to me, I whispered. I've been loving you, he said simply. Both of you. Since the beginning. The dining room felt like it was underwater. Sounds came to me muffled and strange. Dylan's sharp intake of breath. Jessica's whispered, "Oh my God." The tick of that ancient grandfather clock marking each second of my world falling apart. But underneath the chaos, something else was happening. Like someone had cracked open a door I didn't know existed in my mind. A young man in fatigues, laughing as I tried to teach him to make spaghetti. Strong hands on my belly, feeling the baby kick. Green eyes the same shade as Dylan's, looking at me like I was his whole world. I remember cooking. The words fell out of me without conscious thought. You couldn't cook anything without burning it. Marcus went very still. You made me practice scrambled eggs for 3 weeks. And you still burned them. The memory felt like looking at someone else's life through frosted glass, familiar shapes, but distorted. We had this tiny apartment with the broken air conditioner. You said you'd fix it. I never did learn to fix anything, he whispered. More fragments tumbled free. His laugh, the way he hummed when he thought no one was listening. The night we'd painted the nursery pale green because we wanted to be surprised. You left. Anger flared hot and bright in my chest. When I was pregnant, you left. I had to ship out. I didn't have a choice. His voice was raw. I tried to get emergency leave when you told me about the baby, but you promised you'd be there when he was born. I tried. God, Sarah, I tried everything. I was on a transport back to Kentucky when I got the call about the accident. I touched my head unconsciously, running my fingers over the scar hidden by my hairline. The scar I'd always assumed came from some childhood mishap I couldn't remember. Dylan spoke up suddenly, his voice small but steady. "So you're my real dad?" The adults all turned to him as if they'd forgotten he was there. This whole horrible revelation was about him, and we'd been talking around him like he was invisible. "I'm your dad either way," Marcus said firmly. "Blood doesn't change that." "But you lied to Mom." "To me." Dylan's voice was getting stronger, clearer. "You made us think we were a different kind of family." "We are a family," Marcus insisted. "Nothing changes that." Margaret laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Marcus. You still don't understand." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, setting it on the table with deliberate care. "Nothing changes? That's where you're wrong, son. Everything is about to change." The envelope sat there between the crystal and china like a bomb waiting to explode. "You see," Margaret continued, her voice sickeningly sweet, "there's one more thing Sarah needs to know. About why you really left her." Margaret's manicured fingers drummed against the manila envelope like she was playing a piano concerto of destruction. Her smile had the edge of a blade. "Open it," she said simply. Marcus reached across the table so fast his water glass toppled. Don't what?" "Don't tell the truth." Margaret's laugh was like ice cracking. "Don't show her what kind of man she really married." I stared at the envelope like it might bite me. "What's in there?" "Letters," Margaret said. "Hospital records. Phone transcripts." She paused dramatically. "Truth." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. The first thing I saw was my own handwriting, younger, shakier, desperate. "Marcus, please come home. The doctors say I might not remember things for a while, but I'll remember you. I'll remember us." My breath caught. More letters, all in my handwriting. "The baby came early. He's perfect. He has your eyes. I don't understand why you won't visit. Everyone says you came once, but I don't remember. The doctors say my memory should come back. I'm trying so hard to remember us." And then, in different handwriting, Marcus's on official military letterhead. "Request for emergency family leave. Denied. Appeal for compassionate reassignment. Denied. Request for early discharge. Denied." "He tried," I whispered. "Oh, he tried," Margaret agreed. "But that's not the interesting part." She reached across and flipped to a different set of papers. Doctor's notes. Assessment reports. Patient shows signs of selective memory loss. Trauma-induced. Recommend against forcing recall. Family member M. Hampton advised that patient's recovery should not be influenced by stress of unknown relationships. Per consultation with patient's mother M. Hampton Sr., recommend limiting contact with individuals from traumatic period. The papers blurred as I read. Margaret. Margaret had been there. Margaret had spoken to my doctors. I breathed. I was emergency contact, Margaret said calmly. Your parents were dead. You were alone. Someone had to make decisions. You told them to keep him away. I told them to protect you. From confusion. From stress. Her voice was reasonable, measured. From being manipulated by a boy who got you pregnant and left. He didn't leave. My voice cracked like a whip across the dining room. You just showed me he tried to come back. Did he? Or did he just write some letters he knew would never be sent? Marcus was on his feet again, his face white with rage. You told me she'd moved on. You said she didn't want to see me. I protected our family, Margaret said simply. Both families. From a complication. Dylan's voice cut through the chaos, small but clear. You kept my parents apart. Everyone turned to him. He was sitting perfectly still, but his eyes were blazing with an anger I'd never seen in my gentle, quiet son. You kept them apart, he repeated, louder. You lied to both of them. For 10 years. Margaret's mask finally slipped. I did what was necessary. You destroyed our family before we even had a chance to be one. Dylan stood up slowly, deliberately. At 9 years old, he was still small enough that standing barely brought him to eye level with the adults sitting around the table. But something in his posture, the set of his shoulders, the lift of his chin made him seem far older than his years. You want to know what I think? His voice was steady in a way that made every adult in the room go silent. Margaret opened her mouth, but Dylan held up a hand, a gesture so unexpectedly commanding that she actually stopped talking. I think grown-ups are really good at messing things up. He looked around the table, his green eyes moving from face to face. He pointed at Margaret. You decided you knew what was best for everyone without asking them. Margaret's face flushed. Young man, you don't understand. I understand that you kept my parents apart. I understand that you lied to both of them. Dylan's voice gained strength. I understand that you watched my mom struggle as a single parent for years when you could have helped her remember the truth. He turned to Marcus. And you gave up. When it got hard, when it got complicated, you just left. Marcus flinched like he'd been slapped. Dylan, I was trying to protect. You were trying to protect yourself. Dylan's words were sharp, precise. You were sad that Mom didn't remember you, so instead of fighting for us, you made up a whole new story. I wanted to defend Marcus, but Dylan wasn't finished. He looked at me. And Mom, you let yourself believe that the story was simple. That Dad just magically appeared when you needed him. You never asked the hard questions because you didn't want complicated answers. The silence that followed was deafening. Dylan took a deep breath. But you know what? None of that matters anymore. He walked around the table until he was standing between Marcus and me. I don't care that you lied, he said to Marcus. I don't care that you didn't remember, he said to me. I don't care that you tried to control everyone, he said to Margaret. He reached out and took both my hand and Marcus's hand. I care that we're here now. I care that Dad loves us enough to tell the truth even when it's scary. I care that Mom is strong enough to handle complicated things. And I care that we finally know who we really are. He looked back at Margaret, his young face serious. We're a family. Not because of your permission. Not because of what happened before I was born. But because we choose each other. Every day. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Dylan squeezed our hands. Can we go home now? I want to look at the photos Dad probably has hidden somewhere and learn about the parts of our story I missed. Home had never felt more like home than it did that night. We sat in our living room, Marcus, Dylan, and me, surrounded by boxes Marcus had retrieved from his storage unit. Photos, letters, sonogram pictures, a tiny hospital bracelet that read Baby Hampton in faded ink. This was our apartment, Marcus said softly, showing Dylan a picture of a cramped little space with mismatched furniture and a bassinet in the corner. Your mom painted that nursery 3 times because she couldn't decide on the shade of green. Dylan studied the photo solemnly. I lived there for about 2 months before. Marcus trailed off. Before the accident, I finished. My memories were coming back in waves now, not all at once, but in gentle fragments that didn't hurt to receive. Like my brain was finally ready to let me remember. I picked up a letter from the pile, one I'd written to Marcus during those confused weeks in the hospital. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. I know there's something I'm supposed to remember about you. Something important. I wrote you so many letters, I said wonderingly. I kept them all. Marcus's voice was quiet, along with all the ones I wrote to you but never sent. Dylan had found a photo of me, hugely pregnant, laughing at something off camera. You look happy here. I was. I studied my younger self's face, radiant, glowing with love and anticipation. We both were. We spent hours like that, reconstructing the story we'd lost. Marcus showed us pictures of him in uniform, looking impossibly young. I found journal entries from when Dylan was tiny, where I'd written about his first smile, his first word, which had been "dada," naturally. Mom, Dylan said eventually, curled up between us on the couch. Are you mad? About the lying? I considered the question seriously. Was I mad? There was hurt, yes. Confusion. A sense of years stolen. But underneath all of that, I'm glad we know the truth now, I said finally. All of it. Even the ugly parts. Marcus reached across Dylan to take my hand. I'm sorry. For all of it. For leaving. For the deception. For loving us the best way you knew how? I squeezed his fingers. That's not something to apologize for. Dylan yawned hugely. So we're really a family? Like all the way? All the way, Marcus confirmed. Good. Dylan closed his eyes. I like our story better when it's true. As Dylan drifted off to sleep between us, I thought about what he'd said at dinner. About choosing each other. About family being more than blood or circumstance or convenient lies. Looking at the photos scattered around us, evidence of a love that had survived separation, trauma, manipulation, and 10 years of stolen time, I realized Dylan was right. This was our family. Complicated, imperfect, reconstructed from fragments and stitched together with truth. But ours. Finally, completely ours.